Almost all of today's show was recorded before Jeffrey M'ba entered the portal, so we will start there. Then you'll hear me refer to it as a certain possibility as we talk with Justin Ferguson on today's show. But Jeffrey M'ba, the former #1 JUCO player in his class, announced he's entered the portal. And this has been some weird back and forth thing, right? In the last portal period, he kind of teased it and put up some like Instagram stories, and then goes through spring, had a chance to be a starter, and then it seemed like he kind of lost it with the emergence of Jason Jones and Justin Rogers being thrust in as starting defensive linemen, which has caused Marcus Harris to play that true starting defensive end, kind of pushing Jeffrey M'ba back in the depth chart. And so then if you're M'ba, I think he was at this point in his career where he expected to be a starter and be expected to be a go-to player in this defense. And I think going through spring, he realized that possibly wasn't going to happen. And of course, we don't know how summer and fall camps would have gone. But these guys, as far as reps and as far as, how things go in meetings and just the natural pecking order of things, this is an example of these guys kind of getting a better whiff of what's going on than we ever could because they're in it every single day. As far as what Auburn's losing in Jeffrey M'ba, I think they're losing a guy that has the upside of just about anybody in college football. I mean, the thing is, he's just raw. He was just raw, and his pad level was kind of inconsistent at times. And I just think Marcus Harris is a better football player when it comes down to it. And I don't think Jeffrey M'ba wanted to wait anymore. In fact, in a statement that he put out on social media, he said, "My first high school game, I hardly played. And then I ended up the best player in my state and top 10 in my position. My first year of JUCO, I hardly played. Then I ended up the best player in the United States. My first year at Auburn, I hardly played, ... I think you understand the pattern." I think he was wanting a bigger turnaround in his second year on the Plains, and I just don't think it was happening at the speed in which he wanted to. So what does this mean? I think Zacchaeus Walker then becomes probably that #2 guy, and I think it puts more of an emphasis, and I hint at this in the conversation with Justin Ferguson of the Auburn Observer in just a few minutes that you'll hear, but I think it adds an emphasis to that pass rusher need in the transfer portal. And I think that comes as a jack linebacker spot because you really only have two that I think this coaching staff really feels good about in SEC play with Elijah McAllister and Keldrick Falk. And I think the drop-off is after that. But I think it also puts an emphasis on a pass rusher from a true defensive end standpoint. Because after Marcus Harris, I think Zacchaeus Walker, you feel good in a run-stopping type scenario. But what does that mean moving forward for, possibly another guy that could scoot out there? We don't really know exactly what that looks like quite yet. So I think that's something to look at as the portal opens tomorrow. Another position of need, obviously quarterback, wide receiver, and you may argue that #2 ahead of wide receiver now is pass rusher, and that means that jack linebacker spot as well as that defensive end. Let's get into the rest of today's show. This is Locked On Auburn.
Freezing temperatures are likely for several hours inland and a few hours closer to the coast.
Yes.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. And happy Ferg Friday to all who celebrate, as we are joined by Justin Ferguson with the Auburn Observer. And Ferg, this new era of college football, we get another glimpse of what it's really going to look like tomorrow when this second transfer portal window opens. Mm-hmm. If you're Hugh Freeze, if you had to kind of guess and put yourself in the brain of Hugh Freeze, where do you think he's going first once it's this wave of players enters the portal this weekend?
Yeah, I think quarterback is first and foremost on everybody's mind, and it should be. I do think it's going to be very interesting to see where Auburn goes, right? Because they were selective that first portal window. They didn't necessarily just get a guy for the sake of getting a guy. Now, there were a couple of guys in the portal they went after pretty hard that you could easily say, okay, they would have been starters for you. Neither one of them worked out. So it's just like, is there going to be a guy like that in the portal this year, or in this cycle, I should say. That's the main question. If you have a situation where, like right now, Ashford, Garriter, Finley, Brown in your room right now, I don't think Auburn, like if that stays pat, I don't think Auburn necessarily has to go get another guy just to get another guy. But there's a departure in the room. Also, if you get a situation where somebody comes up in the portal that you say, oh man, that dude could start right away for us, or at least could be a really, really good competitor and give us some juice in the fall. That's where I think they would go. It's just who's going to come in. Like kind of nobody really knows at this point. And the names that are currently in the portal, or at least said they're going to be in the portal at quarterback, not necessarily guys you're going to sit here and say, oh, you got to move heaven and earth to bring in, but that all can change in the next year. So quarterback, obviously, first and foremost, the top priority there. And like Freeze said after the 8A game, they're going to be open to it. It sounds like he's very open to it, but I think it is going to depend on like who's available and kind of what they feel like the quality of the transfers are.
Yeah, and I guess there's been some disagreement when we've had this conversation in regards to, like, is somebody that is the caliber of quarterback that can really change the offense even going to be available this weekend? We'll certainly have to wait and see.
Yeah.
But, a lot of these guys that we're kind of speculating, like, are they 2 wins better than Robbie Ashford? Are they 1 win better than Robbie Ashford? And it's like, I don't know. I don't know.
And the important thing is that Freeze said on Saturday, he feels like they can win games with the quarterback staff. And I agree, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I think there is real potential in a system where Robbie Ashford, is healthier, is continues to get. I think this offense is just going to fit him better than the previous offense did. And we already know what kind of player he is with his legs. I mean, last season, he was a top 5 running quarterback in college football.
Yeah.
I also think a guy like Holden Garriter, just the talent that he's got, the arm talent, if he can lock into this system and really rock and roll, like that seems to be a guy that you could build around, for the future. Finley's the one that you sit here and say, okay, there's going to have to be a lot more you would have to see from him over the next several months for him to win that starting job again. But like, I'm not going to rule anything out at this point because everybody's kind of getting equal reps. I think they can win. It's just, do they have somebody in that room that either can raise the ceiling of that room or at least be on that level with guys? Because like the thing now at this point, with the exception of Garner, you've got your 2 quarterbacks in Robbie Ashford and TJ Finley. Mm-hmm. They've played and started in the SEC before, and so if you're going to try to bring somebody in to kind of raise that level, you would at least need somebody who I think has shown that they are capable at least at the FBS level of being a consistent starter. That seems to be kind of square one.
So I guess the talk on the street is, Ferg, that Auburn may lose a guy at quarterback through the portal. Sure. A lot of people assume that's going to be TJ. We'll see. And then he's eyeing 2 guys that he wants: an older veteran, experienced player, and then maybe a younger guy that he can kind of build around moving forward and kind of compete with Walker White and Holden Garner next year. That's kind of the assumption of what a lot of people are going to go with. We'll see if that certainly happens. But if that's the case, would it surprise you at all?
No, I don't think it would. I do think if you lose one of your 4 quarterbacks in your room, I think you would need to go get another one. And it'd be interesting to see. Like, I don't think they're going to rule anybody out of like, okay, we're not going to take somebody because he's this age or anything like that. But I do think you want to be smart with how you do it and manage it. You've also got Hank Brown coming in as well. So you've got, you're trying to get that 1 quarterback in each class. Right now you have Garner and then you have Brown and you have White next year. So like you're on a pretty good consistent path as it stands right now. I think you just need to find, I think if you bring in anybody in the transfer portal at quarterback, I think your priority needs to be, hey, can you help us win right now? Because the future is looking brighter at the quarterback position because of the way they've recruited. But you don't necessarily have to say, okay, well, we need to get more and more of these type of projects. You need to get somebody you feel like in 2023 can help you be a better football team.
Yeah, all right. So quarterback's the first of the 3 main position groups where I think there's like a pretty big concern. The next is pass rusher, specifically that jack linebacker spot, and maybe even a defensive end, like a pass rushing defensive end to back up Marcus Harris. And we'll certainly see what that looks like. But are those guys going to be here? Like, are those guys going to enter the portal? Because teams tend to take care of pass rushers, Ferg, even in this NIL era. If you're a pass rusher that's not taken care of, maybe you feel like, oh, I can get a pay raise somewhere if that's kind of your motivation for playing. But outside of that, like, I'm just kind of curious to see, maybe they find another Marcus Bragg type situation that was okay, maybe solid at, a lower level of football, then maybe you can get more out of him at the SEC level. I think if Auburn could take 2 Marcus Braggs right now, I think they would do it in a heartbeat.
Absolutely. This is speculation on my part. This isn't anything definitive, but I do think that in this second window, especially at a position like Jack linebacker, edge rusher, your best bet is probably going to be somebody who was a really good group of 5 player trying to make that step up. Think about Auburn on the offensive line this past cycle, where they looked at 3 group of 5 transfers and said, hey, you can come play right now, and we need you right now, and we think you can play here. And I think that's kind of the same mindset you can have at the Jack spot. I think Elijah McAllister is going to give you a lot this year. Production wise, stats wise, he's not a 5, 6, 7 sack guy. He just hasn't been that guy in his career to this point, but I think he's going to play a role for you. I think Keldrick Faulk's potential is really, really high. But as I wrote about recently at the Observer, like, it's hard for true freshmen to come in and just tear it up as a pass rusher in the SEC immediately. So that's a huge position you have to go get. Now, if there's somebody who is a really good pass rusher, maybe a smaller or a lesser known, or I'd say maybe not a lesser known, but not as high of a caliber of a Power 5 program as Auburn, maybe you can roll the dice there and find something. But yeah, I feel like Auburn has really, Hugh Freeze, I think, is pretty smart about the way he communicated some of his messages in the spring. And it said, like, hey, we're open to anybody. Come on in. We'll give you. And he's talked specifically about edge rusher and Jack linebacker. So if I'm a guy that is considering maybe going into the portal or anything like that, at least it's out there that, hey, Auburn's open for business when it comes to pass rushing, because they just lost so much. And what they've got coming back just isn't really established in terms of production at this point in their careers.
Any concern in your mind losing a Jack or an edge guy?
There's always a chance. It's just so thin at that position right now that you're just like looking like, there's going to be playing time. There's going to be opportunities. But yeah, I mean, if guys feel like they're going to be down on the depth chart and, don't have a whole lot of opportunity to play right now, why not pop into the portal and see what you can do somewhere else? I think there's going to be several, like, pretty much, I don't know if every single position on the team can look like that, but I think there's a good bit of ones that will have that kind of mindset.
And the wide receiver is fascinating because there's so many different dudes, and I just can't imagine that they all stay, Ferg. And then also, I think Hugh is looking for something different at wide receiver than the past 2 coaches did. All the head coaches that brought in these guys, I think Hugh Freeze wants something a little bit different. And so I'm just, that one may be the position group with the most movement as far as guys in and guys out. I certainly think guys out is going to be just because there's so many guys at that position, and I just don't know how many of them really feel like they're going to be able to play this year.
Yeah, I think Auburn's going to play more receivers than they're used to playing these last few years in that group, but it's just going to be a matter of do those guys feel like they could get more playing time somewhere else? And, what do you want to bring in? I think for Auburn, you've got Javarius Johnson, you've got Coy Moore. Nick Martiner has produced at the group of 5 level before. But other than that, it's a lot of potential and maybe and what if. Now, some of those pieces like Camden Brown and Chick Dawson and Jay Fair, like, there's a lot of those guys where you can kind of point to and say, hey, man, if it pops, it'll be really, really good. But again, it's kind of the same thing with the quarterback spot. You can win with them, but you would love to add something more if you can go get it. And I think that's the big thing about the passing game. There's potential in Auburn's passing game. It's a major work in progress, and wanting to kind of boost that with an injection of fresh talent, it makes a ton of sense, especially in the portal era.
Yeah. So those are the big 3. I think they're going to try to add a depth piece on offensive line, maybe some depth pieces on defensive line. And
I would keep an eye. I would keep an eye on guard. I would really keep an eye on the guard spot. We know Hugh Freeze, when we talked to him at the Senior Bowl in Mobile, he said he wanted to carry one more offensive lineman than they had right now. Maybe tackle, like you could bring in a tackle and feel a little bit more secure about your depth there. I get that, but like, I also know that, those guard spots, they've moved around a lot of different guys. And if they could find a Britton or a Wade or a Jones at a guard spot, it would make a lot of sense to just go ahead and lean all into this rebuild.
Yeah, I think that'd be a huge win. And worst case, they don't beat out a Jeremiah Ryder or Tate Johnson or a Connor Lew, and you got another offensive lineman you can rely on. Which
that would be really helpful. Absolutely,
we're kind of in uncharted waters, for Auburn folks for the past few years. I think that'd be a great situation to be in. I want to discuss some of the scholarship situation, what folks can expect. I got some numbers wrong over the past few weeks, so let's discuss that in just a moment right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show brought to you by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious snack, but you don't want all the sugars and calories, then you need to try the best tasting protein bar ever. That is Built Bar. All Built Bars are covered 100% in real dark chocolate. It is delicious, decadent, real chocolate. Ton of flavors at Built.com, like churro, peanut butter brownie, cookies and cream, coconut, all kinds of good stuff. And they're all, for the most part, around 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. And you can head over to Built.com or your local Sam's Club or Walmart today to get all of your Built goodness. Justin Ferguson of the Auburn Observer. So we're seeing different numbers throughout Auburn media, but most of them are 85 or 86 scholarships, counting the rest of the 2023 class that's coming in. I've been saying a little higher than that. I'm off on that. So let's assume it's 85 or 86, which essentially means, Ferg, that if you bring someone in, someone must leave. I mean, that's pretty much where we're at to stay at that 85 overall. So I guess that's good. I guess it's essentially you're just going to be trading guys is kind of one way to look at it if you're this coaching staff.
Yeah, you also got to keep in mind, like this first window, I think Auburn had 11 guys go out via the portal. So, I mean, I don't expect there to be as much this time around. But attrition, it's just natural. It's just normal. Look at basketball. It's just a fact of life at this point. And it's not necessarily, oh, you're running a bad program or, oh, you can't keep your guys at all. It's like, no, everybody's dealing with this right now. Even, especially the bigger and biggest and best programs in the country have to deal with that. So, yeah. I will stress, I mean, I have a scholarship tracker on my site, and I know other people do as well. I want to stress, mine is, I can't speak for everybody else's, mine is heavily unofficial. This is me just reading the tea leaves because they try to make scholarship counts and all that, especially back in the day where you had to worry about like counters and all that. Like, it's like, state secrets. It's very under lock and key. So, but yeah,
you used to be able to save, if you sign 23 guys, you can move two more the next year, the following year, or you could borrow from the previous year. Yeah. Weird.
And it was just a cycle that goes back. Now it's done. You can bring in as many guys as long as you're at or under the 85 man hard cap, at the, by the time fall rolls around, you're going to be good. So the scholarship situation is very interesting because, there are several positions that just have a ton of guys. Like defensive back is absolutely just swamped with dudes right now. And that's a position where I'm kind of looking at maybe some movement there because you brought in so many, you're bringing in so many. You had K.N. Lee, and man, what a phenomenal spring he had. K.N. Lee coming in, but then there's 6 or 7 other guys that are coming in that DB room. Obviously, J.C. Hart reportedly on the move to wide receiver, but you've got just different. You've got so many guys coming in. You've got some dudes that are older on this depth chart that might not be starters, might not be key guys. That's a position where you can see kind of maybe push forward. There's a lot of dudes at linebacker at the moment. They got 8 inside linebackers. I think you want to play 4 or 5 or 6, so maybe there might be some movement there.
We've already seen 2 guys say they're going to enter.
Right, and it makes sense. There's just a lot there. We talked about wide receiver as well. I think wide receiver and DB also both kind of make sense. Is that there might be some older guys that look around and say, you know what, I'm not getting the playing time that I think I can go get. You maybe pop somewhere else and go. But a lot of scrimmage, I think you can continue to build and you can continue to kind of I don't think you're in a position where you need to. I don't think you're in a position where you need to run anybody off, quote unquote. I think it's just more of guys are going to make those realizations and those decisions, and then you kind of cycle from there.
And I think you're going to see a few guys that are in the 3 deep on the defensive line and the 3 deep on the offensive line leave, and you replace them. Hugh Freeze's magic number of offensive linemen is 16. They're at 16 right now. And I just bet a few guys are going to leave. I bet at least one does. And so then that allows you to go and kind of give another offensive line scholarship spot to somebody else. So do you have them at 16 offensive linemen?
I have them at 15.
Okay.
Maybe I'm, again, like I said, highly unofficial, folks. Yeah, I need to go back and double check that. We might need to do that when we get done. But yeah, cool. No, I do think 16, like they want to have that. And I think you want to be able to go 3 deep as much as you can and deal with your offense, and have an extra guy to you can kind of move around. There's definitely a real possibility that I forgot somebody. It's been a busy offseason for sure.
Dude, it's been wild, man. It's been wild. There's no doubt about it.
A lot of movement. But yeah, like I said earlier, like if you could run into a situation where you find a starter quality player on the offensive line, whether it's giving you some more competition or maybe even a true starter at guard, or get that fourth tackle spot like that. Like, again, I don't want to down the younger guys in any way, but like your fourth tackle at the moment is Garner Langlow, and he hadn't played a snap of college football yet. Now, could he be somebody you can rely on this year? Sure, absolutely. Connor Lew hadn't even been to a college football game as a player, and is potentially in line to start or be in the 2 deep. So, you can do that. But I do think if you could bolster your depth there at tackle a little bit, maybe with somebody who's just have done it before, in case you get in a situation where you're down a guy or two this year.
Mm-hmm. Right. All right, let's discuss kind of your thoughts on spring as a whole, and if you think there's any concerns about this roster after what you saw on 8A. That coming up right here on Locked On Auburn. Want to encourage you to join the Locked On Auburn Discord. It is free. All you have to do is click the link in the episode description down below. Ferg, your thoughts on spring in general and specifically 8A, any kind of glaring concerns moving forward as the portal period opens tomorrow?
I think we've talked about the concerns. I think you need to get somebody who can rush the passer if you can get it. I think you could use help at quarterback and wide receiver. I mean, I think your progress in your passing game was limited this spring for 2 big reasons. One, a guy like Robbie Ashford wasn't fully healthy. They were getting practices where he wasn't able to throw. That affected things. And then 2, you had a lot of little nagging wide receiver injuries, little minor things that affected, what you were able to do and kind of the progress you saw. But you need some pass rushers. You need to find some answers there at those spots. Other than that, I think your roster, like, you could always use upgrades, and you could always kind of pick and choose different spots. But like, I don't sit here and say there's a flashing red alert, and that goes back to 2 things. One, the work they did at the line of scrimmage, particularly on the offensive side and the transfer portal, was huge, and for that to show tangible signs of progress this quickly is a great sign for this team. And number 2, you got some flips and some true freshmen that are going to play and are giving you some real Kayan Lee, Connor Lew, Keldrick Falk. Like, those guys are going to be able to contribute for you right away. And so I don't want to say you're ahead of the curve, because this is still going to be a rebuild, and this is still going to be a process to get Auburn football to back to where it feels like it needs to be. But I think you do feel solid about just kind of the progress you made at a lot of different positions on the field in the spring, which is a great sign.
Then let's flip that around. Which groups do you think are in a better spot than you originally thought they would be? You may put offensive line in there.
Yeah, definitely offensive line. I think the way they gelled as quickly as they did, I think is a great spot. Inside linebacker, the talk about how many guys they feel like they could rely on this year is big. Now, those guys need to take a step forward, like Cam Riley and Wes Steiner. Robert Woodyard emerging would be really good for Auburn. And then you got Keys and Tolan. I think Keys is going to start or come close to starting for you this year. Tolan, if he can get really like going in this system, I think he's got a ton of potential. But like, between the fact that they're actually going to rotate your linebackers,
Asante. It sounds like Eugene Asante's last week of spring was really, really impressive, is what I was told.
Glad you mentioned him, because Eugene Asante got really good reviews down the stretch of spring. Like, so that's 5 or 6 guys that you feel really good about right now, and that's huge, because this was a linebacker group that you played 2 guys at most for most of the time. Maybe a third guy would pop in every now and then, but that's about it. It's going to be a different way of going about things. So I do think your inside linebacker spot you feel better about than you did coming into spring. And I think we already knew that this was going to be a really good position group, but I think the stock continues to go even higher for your running backs. Even after losing Tank Bigsby, Jarquez Hunter and the reviews he got in the spring were through the roof. Yeah. I thought Damari Alston had a great spring. We heard a lot of good things about him. Brian Battie is going to be a great addition to the room. Sean Jackson's going to continue to fight for playing time and a role, and he had a great A-Day. And, oh, by the way, here comes Jeremiah Cobb, who, is super versatile and just had a really, coming off of a phenomenal prep career. So, I mean, that running back room is going to be the strength of your offense. And if that offensive line is as good as we think they could be this year in terms of improvement, that could be, you'll be a work in progress in the passing game. And hear me say this, I think you'll be a work in progress in the passing game most of the season. Like this is going to be a build. I don't think you're going to have all the answers in the first month of the year or the first month of the fall, but yeah, this is that running back room. I think there's a lot of reason to buy into it even more, even without Tank Bigsby, which is crazy to think about because Tank was so good. Right. Not saying you don't miss him at all, but I'm just saying like you're in a really good position for a guy who for a room that lost one of your best running backs of the last decade.
Yeah, but I mean that list of names is pretty strong. It's pretty solid. So,
and I like the mix. I like the variety that you can.
They all kind of do different things, especially with Battie being a part of it. It kind of makes it more versatile as well. So, and then how do they use Cobb as a freshman? Like that's going to be fun because you have to use them, right? Like you have to use them somehow.
I think you're going to find a way to get him a few times. Even last year, I mean, you had Tank Bigsby, you had Jarquez Hunter, but you still found a way to get Damari Alston on the field. I mean, talent. Especially in the running back room, that is the one position where you see guys as freshmen contribute right away. Because that is like I would say it's probably the easiest position for a freshman to contribute. And Auburn under Cadillac Williams is going to continue to recruit and develop those guys and turn them loose early on in their careers, which is a really good sign.
Ferg, how can people check out everything you've got going on right now, which is a ton? There's a ton of things happening right now.
Oh, yeah, AuburnObserver.com. We'll have an eye on everything. The roster tracker for football will start getting clicking again with the transfer portal coming up. We also have a basketball roster tracker. There's a lot of stuff going on with the portal as well. Yeah. You can check out my breakdown of Denver Jones from earlier this week. A lot of people really seem to enjoy that one. Mailbag out on Friday. Podcast. We just added Dan Peck to our crew. So he is now doing our podcast with Painter and myself twice a week. So we've got podcasts up there as well. It's $6 a month or $60 a year to sign up for the Observer. Everything we do gets emailed to your inbox at 6 a.m. Central Time most weekday mornings. AuburnObserver.com. Check it out. It's the off season, but no, it's not really.
Doesn't really feel like the off season right now.
No, it makes our lives a lot easier in terms of getting content. Busier. But, man, it's not like we're sitting here in the offseason scraping around like, oh, what are we going to write about? What are we going to talk about today? No,
it's really not going to slow down until like June, which is awesome. You're telling me we only have to work about June and July and then like, okay, cool, fall's here. Yeah, I'll take that.
You start, planning your vacations and all that.
That's right.
It's good. It's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
No, it's been a great addition.
I am a big transfer portal guy. I think it's good for the players. I think it's good for the sport. I know it's a headache for coaches. But that's why you get paid millions of dollars, boys. Like that's why you got the money.
I mean, everybody needs to look at what I don't like Roger Goodell, but what he's done with the NFL about making it a year-round sport.
Oh yeah,
with free agency and the draft and training camp and OTAs and all of that, it's like
college football's there.
College football's pretty close,
and college basketball's getting there too now. I'll tell you that.
You're right.
Because the portal's even crazier on that side.
Yeah, it's a good time to be a fan of college sports right now. So
absolutely.
Find all my written work at auburndaily.com, and we will see you on Monday. This has been Locked On Auburn.